All right. So today we're going over the book of Genesis. This video is for people who want to know all the stories that are in Genesis, or want a recap of the stories that are in Genesis, but don't have the time to read through the whole book again. I kind of want to do a quick overview and then go into the details of each story. Um, just a quick overview, kind of an outline of the video and of Genesis, and then more of a deep dive into each story individually. All right, so in the beginning, God creates the whole world. The first few chapters of the Bible are about the Garden of Eden and the creation. So, creation. And then Adam and Eve. Then the first story outside of Adam and Eve is Cain and Abel. The first two children of Adam and Eve. And then from there, it kind of skips forward a little bit. And it goes to the story of Noah and the ark. It touches on the Tower of Babel. And then really the first character who's like the beginning of the Jewish and Israel covenant with God is Abraham. Abraham has a son, Isaac. Then Isaac has a son, Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons, but the most significant and the last story in this whole book, Genesis, is Joseph. So this is the broad overview of Genesis. And, each of these little dots here, they have their own story, like a few chapters for each of them. But let's go and take it back from the beginning. The very beginning, God creates the earth in 7 days. He creates different things on each day, and on the seventh day, he rests. Now, Adam is the first man, and originally God creates him alone, and he names all the creatures, and he's like lonely, so God is like, I need to make him a partner. He takes a rib out of Adam while he's sleeping, and creates Eve out of Adam's rib. Now, they live in this place called the Garden of Eden. Now, the Garden of Eden is like a ultra paradise of the natural world. The lamb and the lion sleep together. Everything's in harmony, and there's no sin in the Garden of Eden. There's two important trees in the Garden of Eden that you need to know about. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God says, the only rule I have for you here is don't eat from that tree. And then there's the tree of life, which gives you, I guess, eternal life. And basically, the fall of man is Adam and Eve breaking their one rule and eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the serpent is the character in Genesis who kind of convinces them. He says, God doesn't know what he's talking about. He's keeping you dumb. If you want to be like God, eat from this tree and you'll know everything. And what's weird is it's like, it's kind of like God set up the whole thing and he created everything. So it's like, it's kind of odd that he put that in there unless he actually wanted man to fall. So that's the story of Adam and Eve. Eve eats from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, tells Adam to eat it, and they both kind of have an awakening of consciousness. And they realize they're naked, and they realize they can sin. So the tree works, but the consequence is they lose their eternal life. They're mortal now. And God punishes Adam by saying, now you're going to have to work the earth. You can't just live freely in the garden anymore. It's going to be very hard tilling and working the earth. And the punishment for woman was that they were going to have pain in childbirth and be subservient to men. So that's the story of Adam and Eve. And after they leave the garden, they have children, and the first two are Cain and Abel. This is the second big story. The first two people actually naturally born in the world, not created by God. And Cain here, he's what he does is he grows crops, and Abel is a shepherd, and he has lambs basically. And it comes time for them to make a sacrifice to God. And God loves Abel's sacrifice because it's meat and it smells good. And he doesn't like Cain's sacrifice because it's just like vegetables. And God's like, really? Uh, this is not the best you can do. And because Cain rejects God's sacrifice, Cain's resentful and he hates his brother and he murders him. It's the first killing in our history so far. And then God approaches Cain and is like, where's your brother? And Cain's like, am I my brother's keeper? And basically God curses Cain but says nobody's allowed to kill him, or you'll have a tenfold uh, amount of wrath on your life than Cain has. And so he has to wander the earth, and people resent him for the rest of his life. All right, that's pretty much the story of Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve have a ton more kids, and it goes through the lineage of everybody. But the next big story is Noah. um, Actually, I might have this out of order. I think it might talk about the Tower of Babel first, but this is how we're going to do it. Basically, the world gets populated over time. It's like imagine like ancient civilization, and everybody's become wicked. Everyone, there's no religion, there's no rules. Everybody's just immoral, and God sees this and he's like, I made a mistake. This was wrong. I really screwed up with this whole humanity thing. And he's like, all right, I'm just gonna flood the whole earth and that'll fix everything. And but he has this one person, Noah, who's not living, as a degenerate. And so he's like, hey, I have this one good guy, so I'm gonna tell him my plan and let him build a boat. And he can build a big boat and put all the animals of the earth in it, a pair of each so they can reproduce. And that way, I don't have to create everything again. And so God tells Noah this. He gets his family and all these animals in this big boat that he builds. And God floods the whole earth, and everyone dies except Noah, his family, and the animals on the boat. So, and then God promises never to do it again with the sign of a rainbow. And as of the time of Noah, there hasn't been a flood that's killed everybody, so he's kept his promise. Now, after Noah, we have the Tower of Babel, which basically there's a city of Babel, and everyone spoke the same language, and they were like erecting a tower to reach into the heavens. And God saw that they were like trying to be God, basically, by reaching heaven with their civilization. And he didn't like this because, yeah, he's God. So what are these humans doing trying to coordinate together? So what he did was he changed the language of everybody at Babel, and so none of them could communicate with each other, and so it disrupted the whole city and stopped Babel. That's kind of like a small story. It's like one chapter, but it's referenced a lot in culture, so it's good to know. Now, Abraham is the next character in the next big story. He's very important in that he started the covenant of God between God and the Israelites. He's the father of nations, Abraham. He basically is the start of a lineage of characters that comprise like the history of the Jewish people. And Abraham is basically this guy. He's living in Ur. His name's Abram. It's not even Abraham yet. And God's basically like, hey, you've been mooching off your father your whole life. I'm going to make you a father of nations, but you have to depart your homeland and make a covenant with me and circumcise yourself and all your kids, which is not weird, but that's the covenant he makes with Abraham. And basically, Abraham's old and his wife is old, and he's like, I'm not even gonna be able to have kids. My wife is barren, and God's basically like, trust me. And so Abraham leaves his homeland, and he goes through a series of events, like going to Egypt, leaving Egypt with sheep and goats, and going from king to king, and like every time he goes to a king, he's like says that his wife is his sister, and so the kings there don't kill him, but they try to seduce his wife. And whenever they seduce his wife and find out that it's his wife and not his sister, they get all like, "Oh no, oh no, we tried to sleep with the man's wife. Let me give you flocks of sheep so God doesn't punish me for it." It's really a weird story with Abraham. I would say the most important event, like the most culturally significant, it's referenced a lot, is whenever Abram and his nephew they like split ways. His nephew Lot goes to Gomorrah or something, and God tells Abraham like, Sodom and Gomorrah, there's these wicked cities, and I'm gonna destroy them. And Abraham's like negotiating with God and saying like, hey, if there's 20 people or 10 people that are good, don't destroy it. And he goes down to a really low number, and God's like, there's not even that. And so Abraham's like, all right, if you got to destroy it, just let me get Lot and his family out. And so Abraham goes to the place. He pulls out his nephew, and God's basically like, just don't look back, and you'll be fine. And Lot's wife looks back and turns into a pillar of salt, and the cities get destroyed with fire. It's referenced a lot, and it's like the cities are gay, and so that's where a lot of the God doesn't like homosexuality comes from. And there's a ton of weird events in all these lineage stories that are like, they're not the main stories, but it's like when you're reading through them, you're like, what? It's just very very strange things. Like the circumcision is one of them. It's like, why does God care so much about that? I don't know. But anyway, and then the Abraham and Isaac story is really important too. Basically, God eventually gives Sarah a child, Isaac, who basically God is like, okay, Abraham, I gave you this child, Isaac, and you love him, but you have to love me more than your son. So to prove that, I want you to sacrifice your son to me, kill him on an altar and burn him. And basically, Abraham and Isaac, they go for a walk, and Abraham's like, he carried the sticks, and Isaac's like, but where's the sacrifice? And Abraham's like, oh, God will provide, not telling his son that like, oh, you're the thing that we're gonna kill. And so he goes up, ties him to the sticks, and is about to kill him. And then an angel of God stops his hand, and Isaac's saved by God's grace. And Abraham and Isaac show that they have a lot of faith in God, so it's rewarded. And God promises Abraham that his lineage will be like the sand grains, like so numerous you can't even count, like the stars in the sky. And basically, that's the story of Abraham and Isaac. And the important thing with Isaac is that he has a son that's Jacob. Uh, he has two sons actually, Jacob and Esau. Jacob is the second born, but he's going to be the one that inherits the blessing of his father. And he kind of does some tricks early on by getting the birthright and getting his father's blessing, like pretending to be his brother when his father's blind, and um, just like he's kind of mischievous. And eventually, after his father gives him the blessing, he runs away because he thinks Esau, that his brother, is going to kill him for stealing the blessing of his father. And so he goes away, goes to like his uncle, and he lives with his uncle for like 14 years. Marries his uncle's daughters, both of them, in exchange for his work. And then he flees his uncle, uh, and his uncle gets mad for him leaving. But uh, basically, he's returning back home to Isaac and his brother. Um, and he's very nervous about returning to Esau and his father Isaac, and he doesn't want to go because he knows his brother Esau might be very angry with him for stealing everything, like the birthright and his father's blessing. And God appears to him in like the form of a man and wrestles with him all night because uh, he wants him to go confront his brother and return home and not be like a coward. And because Jacob wrestles with God all night, God gives him a new name called Israel. So Jacob's name now becomes Israel, which means wrestles with God. It's, and then becomes the name of the nation. So that's an important event. He also has like a dream called Jacob's Ladder, which is often referenced. It kind of is like an infinite ladder leading up to heaven. Um, but anyway, Jacob, he eventually gets the courage, goes and meets Esau, and Esau's not even mad. He's like opens his arms up to Jacob and is like, "Hey, it's no problem. I love you, and everything's good." All right, now we get to Joseph, which is the last story in Genesis. Jacob has multiple wives and has had 12 kids with all his wives, but his favorite kid is Joseph because it's his the youngest kid, and it was born of his favorite wife Rebecca, who only had one kid. And Joseph is kind of like the favorite child, and all his brothers resent him because he gets special treatment. And so one day, his 11 brothers, they betray him while they're out in a field, and they sell him off to slavery. And Joseph gets taken away to Egypt, and his brothers go back to Jacob or Israel and say, "Hey, we got his coat. He died by wolves." And so Jacob thinks he's dead. His brothers, they know he betrayed him, and he goes off to Egypt. And there in Egypt, Jacob kind of becomes the like the best slave. Like everything that happens to him, he like turns it around. So he gets into slavery with like the general of the guard of Egypt, like the head military guy, and he's such a good slave that the military guy gives him full access to everything, and he kind of runs the show for him. And then Joseph kind of gets betrayed by his wife, the wife of the, I think his name is Pontus, um, the general guy. The wife betrays Joseph because she tries to sleep with him, and then when Joseph says no, she like cries like, "Oh, he's trying to defile me," and so they send Joseph to prison. Joseph kills it at prison. He's like, the warden of the prison loves him, and he's like doing all these great works. And what happens is he interprets the dreams of these prisoners, and he predicts that one prisoner will be put to death and one prisoner will be set free, and they come true. And the prisoner who got set free, he tells the Pharaoh later on, he's like, when the Pharaoh has these dreams that no one can interpret, he tells, "Hey, I know somebody who can interpret dreams, and it's this guy in prison, Joseph." So they pull Joseph out, and Pharaoh's like, "I had two dreams. one where there were there were seven healthy cows, and then there were seven very ugly putrid cows, and the seven putrid cows ate up the healthy cows. And then he had the same dream, but with like ears of corn or wheat instead of the cows. Like healthy wheat was eaten by the ugly wheat. And Joseph is able to interpret it right away as, oh, this is going to be 7 years of great harvest and health for Egypt, and then 7 years of famine. And he basically says, well, we'll just need to stockpile during the 7 good years 1/4 of all the grain and meat that comes in. And then for the famine, we'll have enough surplus to provide for the people. And then it comes true. The 7 good years happen. Joseph's actually running the show for Egypt. The Pharaoh gives him the power to, like, talk to the farmers and harvest everything for the stockpile. And so Joseph becomes like the head, the right hand man of the Pharaoh, and he's kind of uh, basically running these surplus stores in Egypt. And the famine is across all the land, not just Egypt, which makes foreigners come to Egypt to get grain and stuff. And Joseph's 10 brothers come, and they talk, and they're like, "Oh, we need grain," and Joseph recognizes them, and he basically puts them through a few tests to see if they've changed, and turns out they regret killing, or they regret selling him into slavery. And Joseph forgives them, and he invites them all to Egypt. And that's kind of where the book of Genesis ends. So you have this whole lineage of the first 1, 2, 3, 4 generations of Israelites. And before that, you kind of have the creation story, the fall of man, um, and the like retribution of God with these two stories of Noah and the Tower of Babel. And it's kind of like it wraps up very nicely. And the next book in the Bible is Exodus, and it picks off with Moses. He's the main character in Exodus, and it's about the Jews leaving Israel. I mean, leaving Egypt, and that's kind of the whole story wrapped up kind of neatly. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any feedback for me, or if there's any details that I skipped that you thought would be good to know. I know there's a lot of like sub stories with Abraham and Jacob that I skipped, but I think this is the main, like if you know this, you're good, you know. Okay, thank you. Bye.